All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and start today's meeting. So, Rosie, are we ready to begin?
Yes, Madam President.
Okay, so it's 9 a.m., and I'm going to call the July 11th, 2025 meeting of the SDCERS Board of Administration to order. Rosie, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam President, we have a quorum with the following members absent: Ms. Michelle Bush and Ms. Christiana Gauga.
Thank you, Rosie. Moving to Section 3, public comment. Rosie, do we have any public comments?
No, Madam President, we don't have any public comment for today's meeting.
Okay, great. Moving on to Section 4, approval of the consent agenda items, service retirements, drop entries, drop retirements, training, and board agenda calendar. Before I call a motion for the approval of the consent agenda items, are there any board members that would like to pull any item from the consent agenda? None? Okay, so hearing no request to pull the consent agenda, may I please have a motion and a second to approve items A through E? Okay, so let's go. We have a first and a second.
It was moved by Paul Kaufman, seconded by Mr. Clifford Cheerson, and please feel free to cast your votes.
Okay, great. So this finishes our consent agenda items. Next, we'll move to Section 5, business.
Madam President, may I announce the
Please,
result
go
of
ahead.
the vote?
Sorry.
Thank you. I apologize. With all votes in, Madam President, this motion passes 10-0.
Great. So now we will have, we'll move to our business and operations agenda, starting with the first action item, staff recommendation to amend the overpayment and underpayment of the benefits policy.
Good morning, Lisa Marie. Good morning, board members.
Good morning, Johnny.
In February, we began to explore ways the board could amend its overpayment of benefits policy in light of changing IRS law. This will be our third time talking about this topic, and staff believes, I truly believe, that this is ready for action. So at the May meeting, we explored limitations for ERISA-governed plans. However, a few board members were interested in not collecting these overpaid benefits either by type, by amount, or in its entirety. So the board asked staff to explore those suggestions. The board also asked other questions, such as what is staff doing to avoid errors? What would staff workload look like if we change the overpayment policy? And what's the outstanding balance of monies owed because of these corrections? The answer to those three questions is in the memo attached, and I hope that helps your guidance. The memo also explains the types and amounts of corrections made in the last 4 years and concludes that any changes to the policy should really focus on overpayment of benefits caused by staff or a plan sponsor as allowed by the IRS laws and regulations. Now, of all the various ideas discussed, staff recommends one. Staff recommends the board amend its policy to limit the correction of overpaid benefits caused by staff or plan sponsors to 3 years from the date that staff discovered the error. So to give an example, if staff miscalculated a retiree's benefit and we discovered it 10 years later, the 3-year look back would collect 3 years of overpayments, but forgive the 7 years of overpayments and associated interest. This 3-year look back recognizes the hardship to the member and fault of staff or the plan sponsor, but also recognizes SDCERS' duty to collect benefits and to try to ensure that the fund is healthy to pay the remaining benefits to all of our members. This approach also avoids really capping a correction, not knowing what it is in the future at some set number. It's also supported by California Code of Civil Procedure 338A, which is a 3-year statute of limitations on liability upon a statute, and is also utilized by several 1937 Act systems, CalPERS, and CalSTRS. I forgot to tell you that Ashley Dunning, our fiduciary counsel, we asked her to fly down here to support this item and have her available to answer any questions on this item or the next. With that, I'll take any questions, or if the board's ready for a motion, we could do that as well.
Are there any questions? Ashley, do you have any comments?
Only to note that the board has had some really thorough discussion of this topic. We presented it conceptually, as your general counsel noted, many months ago. It came back to the board for further discussion and deliberation, and I fully support the recommendation that you're receiving from staff today.
Okay, great. Well, if there's no comments, can I have a motion in a second?
It was moved by Mr. Clifford Shearson, seconded by Mr. Chris Brewster, and please feel free to cast your votes. And with all votes in, Madam President, this motion passes 10-0.
Great. I'd like to thank Johnny as well as the staff and the board for all the deliberation on this item. Thank you. So now we'll move to business operations action item number 2, staff's recommendation to amend the appeal of staff decisions regarding benefit policies. Johnny, can you address this item?
Yes, thank you. At the February retreat, the board considered ways to amend its appeal of staff decision regarding benefits policies, the administrative hearings that we've had occasionally in the past, in front of the B&G committee first, and then the full board. Under the current policy, a participant really has a ability to request a hearing in front of this board for truly almost any decision that affects a participant's benefit. This broad ability has created situations where the board really doesn't have the ability to grant what the member or participant is asking for. A clear example may be a retiree realizes that the cost of living is extremely high, and even though the plans cap a cost of living adjustment at 2%, they want 20%. Technically, under the current policy, they could come in front of this board and ask for that relief, only to probably be told the plan doesn't allow that, and this board should not grant that request. Through this presentation, we seek direction from the board on how to amend the policy, if at all. In brainstorming, staff has kind of seen 4 broad policy topics, like ways we could look at this. They're listed here, and I'll go through each of the 4 in more detail. Number 1 is the current policy, which is the board doesn't amend its policy and continues to allow for administrative hearings in front of the board for all matters. This is common through public retirement systems in California. They obviously do take some time. Staff works on these administrative hearings. There's quite a bit of work that goes into it. They can take 6 months to a year to prepare for with all the briefing schedule and bring it before the board. And obviously the board spends considerable amount of time as well when they get these hearings. That's option 1. Option 2 is a hybrid of staff's eventual recommendation. And option 2 is to limit administrative hearings in front of this board to matters where the board has discretion to grant the appeal and contain quasi-judicial issues involving questions of fact. The board, when addressing factual issues, can make that decision, but we would try to keep from the board questions of really matters that are outside of a decision-making body, such as I want a 20% COLA, even though the plan gives a 2% COLA maximum. The third option is to send administrative appeals to hearing officers. Some plans that do that are CalPERS and CalSTRS, that if staff determines the appeal cannot be or should not be granted, that member, that participant has a right to a hearing officer. There's benefits to that, obviously, because there continues that process and vetting of that issue. But with it comes also costs to SDCERS staff, as well as the board member, as well as the participants themselves if they go through hearing, if they hire an attorney, etc. And the fourth kind of broad option that staff wants you to consider, and is staff's recommendation, is to delegate these administrative appeals to the CEO and general counsel to staff and direct them to follow board policy and to report those outcomes to the board. So if the board wanted to take up the issue, it could so choose, just like any other issue, to put it on what would be, I suppose, the next board meeting calendar. We already do this in a sense. Your appeals policy has a 3-step process where, let's say, a participant asks for something, staff will look at it, and if it we cannot or should not grant it, we will deny that. Then the formal appeals policy then goes to the CEO, who vets it with the general counsel, oftentimes a fiduciary counsel, benefits administration director, member services director, and if we should not or do not grant that, we tell the participant that, and then it would go in front of the board. So this is really a step that changes the current policy and takes out the automatic right to appeal any decision in front of this body. And that's the end of my presentation. The 4 options, again, I don't think staff is saying the current policy is wrong. I don't think it is. We could refine it. It's really how this body wants to handle it and the amount of appeals they want to hear in front of this body.
So I have a question about number 4. I'm
Yes.
just curious, are there I'm curious if there's like a level of materiality or an anomaly that would the CEO and the general counsel, through their discretion, recognize that it should come to the board, or we will never know?
It's a good question. Do you want to answer that one first, Greg? Go right ahead. Yeah. Well, as I think through this, what we want to do is follow board policy. I always do. But in fairness, there may be situations where the board does not have policy on it. So I could see some further discussion about how do we deal with this given the lack of board direction on a specific issue. So that's something we'd have to vet further. The idea is that we get an idea of what the board wants today, if any changes, and then we come back in September with red lines to the appeals policy to really truly vet out what needs to happen, what can happen.
Because my thought is that if it's a controversial item, I would like the board to be aware of it and then us vet it, as opposed to, because at the end of the day, we're still held accountable for that
Sure.
decision. So I just want to make sure if there is a heightened level of controversy or issue, that it's not just being delegated. At least that's just my overall thought, but I'd like to hear from my colleagues.
Johnny, isn't the way the motion read is that it will come to the board as an outcome and then we can take the item up if we want to. So we always have that discretion if we want to.
Yeah, that's the idea, is we want to help the board with its work, not take it over. So if the board wants to delegate this to staff and staff look through it, we would report the appeal and the outcome. And just like any item, the board could then say, we'd actually like to take this up and discuss this in front of the board. But that would be an affirmative step that the board showed an interest in a specific item versus the current default, which is whether or not the board wants to talk about it, it's coming in front of it.
First question, Johnny, is what's the magnitude of the problem we're trying to solve?
I don't think it's a very big problem in the sense of hours and hours. I think last year we had 2 member appeals and kind of been averaging that post-pandemic. But with that said, it's quite a bit of time. I'd probably say maybe 50 hours plus for staff per appeal, and then the board's time as well.
Thank you. So maybe this is consistent with Lisa Marie's thinking, I'm not sure, but democracy is messy. But one of the reasons it's messy is that people have an opportunity to express their opinion and come in and air their gripes and whatever it may be. And, sometimes when they come in, indeed, there's nothing we can do about it, or we disagree with it, but allowing members in these fairly unusual cases to come in and speak their mind to us about why they think something should change, even if in the end we ultimately can't change it, I think is kind of something that we owe our members.
if the facts are under a scenario where the member wants something that we cannot do by statute or by longstanding policy, shouldn't they be told that up front? And it would not necessarily limit their ability to express themselves. If California law says we can't do it, well, thanks for coming by, but our hands are tied. Period. So that's sort of moot to me. So it's a question of situations where there's interpretation or judgment or some feeling that maybe a policy might be amended. The 50 hours, Johnny, that you mentioned of staff time that may be typical, wouldn't that remain the same if it came to the board or if it instead went to the CEO?
Yes,
So
that would remain the same.
regardless of that, the amount of work along that dimension is identical.
Not quite identical, because we wouldn't be creating a staff report and putting it on the agenda and whatnot. We would still be handling the appeals, though. So let's say 80% of that.
Roughly the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Chris, and to your point, Cliff, about members speaking their mind, that's something that wasn't lost upon staff when we were considering this. We're saying, well, how do they still get to speak if they want to? One, we would have these reports to board, and then two, the members always have their ability to speak, public comment on the issue, and that's their right, and they're welcome to comment on that as well.
Yeah, sorry, if I may, can I just add that one of the values in the couple of cases I can think of that we've heard here that we weren't able to do anything about was it was an educational exercise for us, that we learned about some things going on that we would like to see handled differently or whatever, because the person came before us and told us, hey, this happened.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. So I really appreciate Johnny putting together these board options, and I really like him recognizing that we do have a current process, and it does work. And the reason this matter is before you, because I had a number of board members kind of frustrated with a couple of the appeals in the past 12 months because issues were brought before the board that they, because of statute, they were unable to grant the request. And so it was like, well, if I have no ability to do anything, why are these matters before the board? And so that's why we thought, well, let's just at least have this conversation. So that's why this is here before us today. And so we started looking at the different options. And to me, it really came down to 1 or 4. Both of those are very workable. But with 4, it's really with what Mr. Brewster's talking about, is how do you give access and how do you give transparency about what's going on? Not just to the member, but more importantly to this board, because you really need to know what your CEO is doing, what your staff is doing, the issues that we're facing, and how we're resolving them. And so, it was really critical in speaking with our general counsel is how do you build in the transparency and the feedback loop so that the board understands the issue that came up, the pertinent facts of the matter, and how it was resolved, so that if they wanted to step in and say, we'd like to take an active role in this, that would be easily and available, rather than having the member going directly to Superior Court. And so for 2 reasons, the board could step in and say, well, staff, I think you need to look at this more. I think there is some ability to fix it, or we want to study it more. Or, you know what, we agree with you, staff, we can't fix this, but as Chris mentioned, perhaps there are policy changes, or we can work with the plan sponsors to ask them to change the plan design so that we can avoid these types of issues. So that's really, 4 is really designed to help the board not be faced in those untenable positions, but still have the feedback and the ability to step in when you see fit. So those were the 2 kind of choices of either status quo, and then don't get so mad at staff if we put things in front of you that you can't do anything about, or try option 4 and see how that works. So staff is really fine with either way, but we just thought it would be good to have this governance discussion today.
Can I just ask about option 3, only because nobody's talked about it yet? If we're talking about people that have come before SDCERS and they're told no for whatever reason, and that reason is a policy or law, I'm with what Greg was saying about not bringing it before us because that's a waste of time. But if it's a question of law, in my mind, the hearing officer might be the most appropriate. If that member feels so strongly that they're willing to go out and hire their own attorney and advocate for themselves, why not put that person in front of a hearing officer, let that independent person hear them out, and then we still get the feedback at the end of it? What is your thoughts on option 3?
So your question is, could a hearing officer help with questions of law?
Right. You're telling these folks, we can't do what you're asking because of a law or a policy.
Sure. I personally don't love that situation because I think ultimately the board is in charge of determining what the plan says legally or otherwise, and you have your general counsel and your fiduciary counsel here to advise you on that. And so I'd like to think of us as the experts on what the plans say or pension law in general. And so when you send a question of law out to a hearing officer, which is, I respect them all, they're retired judges, I'm not sure that they have that, maybe have that expertise that your counsel has. And so you're essentially outsourcing at least a recommendation on a legal issue that needs to be decided by this board anyway. So it's not my favorite way to address a question of law. Does that make some sense, Lou?
It does, but in my mind, SDCERS would also have the ability to be in that hearing and advocate our position. So that expertise would still be present in front of that hearing officer. It just makes that determination independent. And correct me if I'm wrong, we're not bound with what that hearing officer says, are we?
No, you're not bound.
So we have an independent person looking at this dispute, weighing both sides, and then reporting back to us, and it gives us kind of an independent perspective. I don't see that as bad.
Ashley?
To your point.
Just to add to the discussion here, hearing officers and administrative adjudications can be particularly useful where you have a disputed fact, you have credibility determinations that need to be made. But as to matters of law, your general counsel is right that you should be receiving legal advice on that from your own counsel, so from your general counsel and your fiduciary counsel as requested. And that advice and decision-making is always subject to judicial review. That's the appropriate avenue, as opposed to, in a sense, delegating legal determinations to hearing officers who don't have the same authority or weight or responsibility as the court system does. So if you're really concerned about whether law is being applied accurately, that should be done through the actual judicial system, Superior Court, Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, as opposed to hired hearing officers.
So how many systems use the option number 4, where it's delegated to the CEO and the general counsel?
I only know of one in California, but I don't have a giant sample size, Lisa Marie. The most popular, I believe, is number 1. And then for the larger systems with more resources, number 3.
If I can jump in on that one as well. I think while the language of the policies is consistent with what your general counsel just said, the reality is that most systems do not have hearings that come before boards regularly. And so it operates in effect the way that 4 does in reality.
Okay.
Yeah, as a practical matter, people do not continue their appeal to the board, is my understanding.
In general practice,
Yeah.
right.
So I think I'm still a little torn, but I definitely agree with Chris that I'd like to make sure that the member has an opportunity to speak before this board, and you're saying that they can, but they have to do it under public comment. Will that be clear to them through the process that if they want to I don't want to just tell them, I don't want them to assume that, or they have to know that their only option is public comment. Maybe it has to be really clear that in the process, if they choose to come to this board, it's going to be handled by staff, and that the only option is through public comment.
Yeah, Lisa, if the board should decide to go that route, Lisa Marie, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If the board should decide to go that route, when we redline the appeals policy, I will include that to make sure that's expressly explained to the members.
Any other comments?
If I may,
Go ahead.
with all of our meetings being open in California, there's obviously a desire for things to have a lot of transparency and members to have access. And I'm perfectly great with that. I do think, though, that if somebody is coming forward and making an appeal and staff has listened to them, gone through the situation with them, and then evaluated the situation and has been able to explain to them that, look, we cannot do this. So you can come before the board, but the board's not going to be able to do anything for you. So knock yourself out. And then we can say, thanks for coming, but there's nothing we can do, as has already been explained to you nicely by our hardworking staff. And under those scenarios, I'm okay with that, of leaving the policy the way it is, as long as we can fairly educate, if you will, the member of what they can expect. Because you don't want there to be resentment. People do want their time to explain it. And if it's a different kind of a situation where it provokes thought and reflection and possible change or not, well, that's what we're here for. So for me, I guess I'm coming down of leaving things kind of the way they are.
I agree. You have any comments, Chris?
Move number 1.
You can either do that, or because that's the current policy,
do
you could have
nothing.
no motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Whatever this
I-
board prefers.
I move no motion.
I don't think you had to do that.
Well, we really appreciate the discussion, because we have heard through different board members of the frustration, and we wanted to share that with you. But we really appreciate your guidance today. Thank you.
If I may, as a closing thought on this, that frustration is real. And I'm very glad that people spoke up about it. And I'm hoping that we can find an internal process to try to bring more efficiency to what everyone does. The member needs to understand that. Their
Right.
hopes cannot be built up unfairly, should not be, excuse me. And so it kind of goes down to the staff people who have to do some of this. And if they need some support from us, we hope we can hear back from them on that.
Thank you, Cliff, and thank you, board members.
Thank you. So we'll now move to business operations action item number 3, City of San Diego Prop B, Police Tier Change Funding, Phase 4. And I'll turn it over to Greg to take this action item.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. It's good to see everyone this morning. Before the board today is a recommendation to establish a funding methodology for the City of San Diego to begin paying their final piece of unwinding the 2012 Proposition B pension reforms. This final piece is the city unwinding the police Tier 5 by transferring Tier 5 members into the previous Tier 4. The city negotiated the unwinding with its employees, and operationally, SDCERS has completed the transfer of the accounts. The police employees are in the appropriate plans and paying the appropriate contributions. So today, we're focusing on the employer contributions. And hopefully, this all sounds very familiar and sounds, when the city reopened the closed tiers, the project was divided up into similarly situated phases 1 through 4. And the board has previously addressed funding methodology for phases 1, 2, and 3. Each of these phases, the board approved the city to pay the missing normal cost contributions with the next regularly scheduled actuarial determined contribution, ADC payment, and the unfunded liability to be amortized over 20 years. Staff recommends adopting a similar payment structure for this final Phase 4. The SDCERS plan actuary finds the recommended Phase 4 funding methodology reasonable. So it's therefore recommended the board approve the City of San Diego to make normal cost contributions for transitioning city safety police members from Tier 5 to Tier 4 to be included with the city's regularly scheduled actuarially determined contribution on July 1st, 2026, and to amortize the underfunded actuarial liability contribution payment for transitioning city safety police from Tier 5 to Tier 4 over a 20-year period, beginning with the city's regularly scheduled actuarially determined contribution on July 1st, 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any questions for Greg? No? So can I have a motion? Thank you.
It was moved by Mr. Clifford Shearson, seconded by Mr. Red Bartolotta. Please feel free to cast your votes. And with all votes in, Madam President, this motion passes 10-0.
Great. Thank you, Rosie. So this finishes our business and operation agenda items. We'll now move to Section 6, the Audit Committee. So Audit Committee Chair Lana Ranchenko, would you please provide the Audit Committee report?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lana Radchenko, and I'll be providing the report out for the Audit Committee meeting, which was held this week on Wednesday, July 9th. There was 3 action items for the Audit Committee. The first was the appointment of the Audit Committee Chair, and my pleasure, I was honored to be approved as the Audit Committee Chair on Wednesday.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. A repeat success. And that was, all the members of the Audit Committee were present on Wednesday, and that was a vote of 5 votes to 0. The second item was to approve the FY 2025 internal audit plan, which Sarah presented to us. There were 4 internal audits, along with other activities that are required by the internal audit charter. And this was also approved by the committee 5 to 0. The third item was the Independent Audit Services request for proposal. So we are required, I think it's after 5 years, to issue a request for proposal for the financial audit. So that motion was also approved by the Audit Committee. And this particular item needs a motion at the board here. So if I can have somebody make that motion.
And Madam Chair, this was moved by Mr. Chris Brewster. And if I could just have your votes. Mr. Brewster, would you like to cast your vote? And with all votes in, Madam Chair, this motion passes 10-0.
Thanks, Rosie. Next, the informational items that we also discussed at the Audit Committee. These are the non-action items. The FY Audit Service Plan, we had a presentation from MGO, Craig Harner, presented the 2025 audit plan, which included a discussion of the scope of services, the deliverable timeline, and any new developments that might impact the audit for this year. The second item was the annual internal audit report, which Sarah presented, and that includes some required items from the new global internal audit standards, as well as our SDCERS internal audit charter. The third item was the internal audit action plan. This is the first action plan that has been created, which Sarah presented to us. Sort of like a strategic plan for the audit function. So that was good to hear. And then the fourth item was the audit report for the San Diego Unified Port District. and the results of that report, which was the scope of it was contributions and reporting audit. There was one informational report from the IT department that Michelle Wagner provided to us. Then we moved into closed session. There was 3 items discussed in closed session. The first was the IT incident handling internal audit report. And that is a report, or sorry, that is an audit that is done by CBIZ. Dean Travis presented the results of that audit report. The second one was also another IT audit, and that one was completed. The audit was outsourced to Security Pursuit. Sean Kilpatrick introduced 2 partners from Security Pursuit, and they presented a very interesting report on the network penetration testing. The third item was the performance evaluation for Sarah, our Chief Internal Auditor. And Sarah will meet with the board as necessary to discuss that performance evaluation if required. Lastly, we went back into open session where we talked about the public employee compensation and discussed the compensation for Sarah, our Chief Internal Auditor. And Colin Brazil presented also a salary study that we could reference while we had that discussion. And that was it for our audit committee meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for November 21st.
Any questions for Lannis? Well, congratulations again, and I look forward to working with you on the audit committee.
I do as well.
And thank you, Bobby, for all your work on the
Yes.
audit committee. So you'll be greatly missed.
Yes. We'll call you in if as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. So with that, we'll now move to the Disability Committee. So Disability Committee Chair Paul Lotz, would you please give us your committee report?
Yes, thank you. The Disability Committee met yesterday, and we welcomed Brett Bartolotto as a new committee member. Thank you, Brett. Glad to have you. The committee met unanimously approved 2 disability actions presented on today's agenda as consent items 1 and 2, and postponed considering a hearing officer recommendation until its September 2025 committee meeting, which is presented on today's agenda as consent agenda item 3. I will be discussing all 3 consent agenda items, but only making a motion for consent agenda items 1 and 2. Are there any questions before I begin, or are there any requests to pull an item for a separate vote? Okay. Starting with the consent agenda item 1 and 2, approve the industrial disability retirement applications for Aleda Markham and Richard Rodriguez. These 2 applications for industrial disability retirement were approved by the committee, and as they are for the same type of benefit, the following applies to each application. The committee approved these members' applications for industrial disability retirement, and each application was supported by evidence of being permanently disabled, being attributable to work duties and causing the need for leaving employment. Are there any questions from the board on these 2 items? No. Moving on to consent agenda item 3, hearing officer's recommendation to deny the industrial disability retirement application of Joel Mojica. The committee postponed considering Mr. Mojica's application for industrial disability retirement based upon the hearing officer's findings and conclusions until the committee's September meeting, so the committee could also have staff's hearing brief included in the meeting material, as the brief is referenced in the hearing officer's report. As such, there is no board vote on consent agenda item 3 today. Are there any questions from the board on this item or any item before I move to approve consent items 1 and 2? No? So we'll wait for this to populate and move it.
And we do have a mover, Mr. Chair. It was
Thank
Mr.
you.
Brett Bartolotta, so please feel free to cast your votes if I could just jump in.
All right, this finishes the Disability Committee action items. Staff presented an information item on disability-related changes in board rules that will be voted on as part of the Business and Governance Committee consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I may just interject and just announce the results
Rolled right
of
through
the
that,
vote.
yes, please.
I didn't want to rudely interrupt. With all votes in the motion, the consent motion for action item 1 till 2 passed 10-0.
Thank you. All right, the committee reviewed the 2 rules, and no further edits or changes were recommended for the Business and Governance Committee's consideration. Moving on, staff provided a disability status report, and it is available in the board agenda package. Disability status reports. The disability report provides an overview of the disability application review statistics, highlighting the caseload is in good shape with a caseload of 17 applications, with all but 1 case with the 18-month processing window, which has been delayed due to the member's non-related health conditions. Are there any questions and comments from the board members or staff? No? Okay. Well, thank you, and back to you, Lisa Marie.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for the committee report. We'll now move to Section 8, Business and Governance. So will our Business and Governance Chair, Bobby Smoon, would you please provide your committee report?
Certainly, thank you. The Business and Governance Committee met yesterday, and before I review the action items and make a motion for the consent agenda approval of action items 1 and 2, are there any action items the board members would like pulled for a separate vote? All right, starting with consent agenda item number 1, staff's recommendation to approve a work order with Sagitech Solutions for additional developer support. Michelle presented staff's recommendation to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute a work order with Sagitech Solutions for additional development outsourcing services. SDCERS outsources the majority of its IT support, and one such vendor, CGI, had one of its employees on SDCERS account retire, leaving SDCERS with the opportunity to continue with a new CGI developer or leverage another SDCERS outsource vendor. Staff found an opportunity to transition this developer role to Sagitech, a firm supporting our pension administration software, which results in a cost savings by replacing a full-time CGI position with a part-time Sagitech resource. The committee unanimously approved the staff's recommendation. The work order's initial term will be July 1st, 2025 through June 30, 2026, with a 1-year option, or with options to extend annually through June 30, 2029. The total cost, including extensions, will not exceed $805,000. Are there any questions or comments regarding this item? Hearing none. Moving on. Staff's recommendation to amend the noted charters, policies, and rules. Staff's recommendation to amend, the committee unanimously approved the recommended changes to various policies and rules with the exception of the amendment to, Rule 6.60, removing the delegation of authority to the CEO to waive the board's drop entry rule should the member be financially disadvantaged. The committee pulled 6.60 from the vote and asked staff to bring the rule back to the committee in September with an amendment when the member entering the drop program is faced with a financially disadvantaged decision. Also, the committee referred Rule 7.180, effective dates for disability retirement, to the Disability Committee to discuss whether a retroactive disability retirement should begin when they submitted their application for disability benefits or when they initially started collecting retirement benefits. Are there any questions from the board on this item before we move for approval of the consent agenda? Motion to approve.
Madam Chair, this motion was moved by Mr. Louis Maggi, and please feel free to cast your votes. And with all votes in, Madam Chair, this motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, Rosie. Moving on to our reports. Staff provided division reports and operational reports, and they are available in the board agenda package. We heard oral reports from Member Services, Benefits Administration, and Information Technology. The committee held a closed session discussion to hear from one of SDCERS cybersecurity consultants on their inability to penetrate SDCERS cybersecurity defenses. As this was in closed session, we're not going to share with you the security secrets, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Are there any questions from any board member? Hearing none, back to you, Lisa Marie.
Okay, great. So now we'll move to Section 9 of the Investment Committee. Investment Chair Cliff Sherishon, can you please provide our committee report?
Of course, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. The Investment Committee met yesterday and discussed 2 action items and 1 information item. The 2 action items are on the consent agenda. The first item, the annual asset allocation review and recommendation, will be pulled for a separate discussion and vote. Would any board member like to pull the second item from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Good. I will give a brief summary of that item after the asset allocation presentation from Aon. So the first item is the annual asset allocation review and recommendation. And for that, we have an all-star team led off by Karina Coleman.
Thank you, Cliff. Annually, the board and the investment committee review our asset allocation, and it's a key risk management exercise. Generally speaking, we are largely comfortable with our current risk stance, and the changes we are recommending are more incremental than substantial in nature. These changes are expected to slightly reduce volatility while maintaining about the same expected level of return. In summary, we recommend to add 1 percentage point allocation to infrastructure and 1 percentage point to diversifying strategies while reducing real estate by 1 percentage point and reducing equity exposure by 1 percentage point. And we further would like to remove a strategic asset allocation to the Opportunity Fund while allowing up to 5% flexibility to invest in more tactical opportunities that may arise. This approach will reduce noise in our performance attribution and more philosophically align with the opportunistic nature of the Opportunity Fund to take advantage of short-term growth opportunities, dislocations, or mispricings. We will also discuss our public equity approach and specifically aim to reaffirm the board's desire to implement a global equity approach with no intended regional biases. We will discuss the structure of our public equity portfolio in greater depth during our structure review at our next meeting. And we will also at that time build out the proposed structure for the diversifying portfolio as well as the real assets portfolio. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Katie and Ashley from Aon.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all. As Karina laid out, we have the very important discussion today of asset allocation. And I will preface this that we had a very lengthy, robust discussion yesterday. I think we talked for maybe over an hour on this, which is important and great because this is among the most important decisions you all as trustees and as a board will make that will impact the performance of the asset portfolio. So we plan to hit the highlights today, but please, as there are questions or topics you'd like to spend more time on, we are happy to take those. So just to set the stage really quickly here, this process started with the asset liability study that was presented at the last meeting. And that really helps us make sure that we have the right level of risk in the portfolio. And just as a quick refresher, what the results of that study indicated that the portfolio is capturing the appropriate level of risk. We expect the portfolio to be fully funded within approximately 10 years based on our current assumptions and the liability profile. And that's important to start there, taking into account the entire picture of the system. We also evaluated the liquidity of the portfolio, both in normal times and in stress times. And we found that there's no concerns in the level of illiquid assets the portfolio has today under all these economic scenarios that were stress tested, which is an important setting for this further conversation. So today what we're talking about is, do we have the right mix? Do we have the right exposure to the right asset classes at the right level? And we talked about this in two different kind of components yesterday. First is really re-underwriting your current asset allocation strategy. We spent a lot of time talking about your current exposures, how that has performed, expectations for that performance, and you have a strong asset allocation. SDCERS has been very methodical in looking at your exposures over time. We don't expect asset allocation to change very frequently, but we do update it based on your current circumstances, as well as our outlook for capital markets. And there have been changes over time, and those have been very well thought out. Your current portfolio is very well diversified. We talked about the level of risk in the portfolio, and one of the things that you all have done is diversified your return-seeking portfolio very well. And so you have a strong allocation across different risk factors to hopefully smooth that pattern of returns over time towards that journey towards fully funded status. The back half of the conversation was talking about the recommendations that Karina had highlighted. And if we flip ahead to page 6, the table here on the right highlights how this would be memorialized in the investment policy if this would be approved today. And I'm going to hit on these really quickly. There are 3 recommendations. I would characterize these as incremental, nudging the portfolio in a favorable direction, but not wholesale changes. And we'll look at the impact on expectations going forward. Some of these are more improving risk-reward expectations, and some of these are more mechanical in the way we communicate them. So to highlight them, the first is the modest shift in asset allocation. Within real assets, SDCERS has a 15% allocation to real assets, which houses both real estate and infrastructure. We're recommending shifting 1% from real estate into infrastructure, balancing that real assets portfolio and offering a little bit more diversification within that asset class. The other shift is moving 1% from public equity into the diversifying category. Again, this is looking to help diversify the portfolio, reduce some of that public equity risk, which is the largest risk exposure in the fund, and also give, again, a little bit more resilience as we look forward into what we anticipate to be a potentially volatile environment for public equities. The next recommendation relates to your public equity exposure, and this is more on how you access that exposure. We're not anticipating changes under the hood to the global equity opportunity set that you have exposure to today. It's more so how you get there. And so what we're recommending is, instead of having policy targets to your U.S., non-U.S., and global, as you see on the left, to have a single public equity allocation at 38%, and allowing your investment team to use the rebalancing policy to maintain the global equity exposure, which the board approved in 2018. And so it's more of an implementation to more efficiently move with how public equity markets have shifted in terms of regional exposure. And then the last recommendation is related to the Opportunity Fund. And I break this up into 3 components. One is just reaffirming that we recommend maintaining the Opportunity Fund. This is really allowing you flexibility to take advantage of opportunities that may be opportunistic in nature, that may be not fit neatly within the rest of your policy, but we like that tool in a policy. And so we're recommending maintaining that. The second part of this recommendation is to expand the allowable allocation here from right now is a max of 3% to a max of 5%. Again, giving a little bit more leeway, a little bit more flexibility for these opportunities and kind of making it worth it. 3% is a small allocation, and we want the effort that goes into that and the costs and the resources to have an impact at the total fund. So expanding that allowable opportunity set. And then thirdly is how we communicate the role of the Opportunity Fund. Currently, we have that 3% max plugged in there, and we're recommending changing that to a 0% target in the policy allocation. The way this will be communicated in the investment policy statement will be a 0 to 5% allowable range in the rebalancing policy. But we believe having that 0% there in the policy reflects the intention of the role of the Opportunity Fund, that it's not a target, but a flexibility to invest in there. So more of how we communicate the role of the Opportunity Fund. The last page that I wanted to just hit on briefly was to highlight the impact that these changes will have on your long-term risk-reward expectations. And so what we show here are the current risk and reward expectations using our capital market assumptions. These are 30-year projections. We show your current policy there in the left, and then we show the incremental moves, the first showing the change within real assets, and then the second moving that 1% from public equity to diversifying. And if you look at the chart on the right, this kind of captures that these are incremental benefits. We're shifting from that purple dot to the blue triangle, and you can see there's an ever so slight increase in return. I would say that we're maintaining expected return with a modest reduction in expected volatility. And so again, not wholesale changes, but again, looking forward, kind of anticipating where we believe we can capture some value and just nudging expectations in a favorable position, lowering risk while maintaining that expected return. So yes.
And while we're on this page, something we discussed had to do with the components within the overall portfolio under this recommendation, where the amount of public market securities holdings really would not change materially.
Yes.
So that should there be a sustained downdraft for some reason, that we would still have the demonstrated ability we've had since inception to every month pay benefits owing to all the members as they come due. So we're not changing, if you will, that type of liquidity profile at the plan level.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. And maybe just on that point, when coming to this recommendation, we did test other portfolios. We evaluated different tweaks and modifications within the context of that liquidity analysis we did at the asset liability study, as that was approving the risk tolerances around liquidity as well as generally risk being taken in the portfolio.
Can you speak to the Sharpe ratio, just so the other board members are familiar with what that term is and the importance of it?
Yes, absolutely. So the Sharpe ratio is looking at the amount of return being earned per unit of risk. And so we're trying, and that's a key metric that we look at that helps us evaluate, are we improving our risk-reward ratio? Are we improving the efficiency of our portfolio? And so we do take it out to 3 decimal places there. It is the third line at the bottom, those summary statistics. But what you can see is by shifting that plot left on our risk-return chart, we're seeing an uptick in the Sharpe ratio, that expected Sharpe ratio of the portfolio. Essentially maintaining that expected rate of return, but reducing, earning that same rate of return, but taking a lower amount of risk to do so.
Thank you.
Just to expand on that, it's a very important metric that's used widely, and it's an economist named Dr. Sharpe. It isn't anything to do with your knife in your kitchen. Where do we have, in the performance review later on, we will compare Sharpe ratios, right? Isn't that
We
is that in one
we
of the
do
slides?
have,
page
yes.
13.
And so this
Just to
slide.
provide context for the whole board.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is looking at the, in green, historical Sharpe ratio, which you can see is much higher than our projections forwards at 0.7%. What the Sharpe ratio that SDCERS has experienced over the
Page
past
number is
10
that,
years. Oh, I'm sorry, page 13 of our presentation. And so we look at this when we look at your peer performance relative to peers as well, because this kind of cuts out the noise that each system has their own level of risk and return needs and objectives. And so this helps create an apples to apples comparison. But this number will largely also be driven by the amount of volatility in capital markets. And so that's why this number is a little bit higher than our expectations going forward. And that volatility in the markets have been fairly low over the past 10 years. But looking at this number relative to a traditional equity bond mix that's not highlighted, but right below that, as well as the peer median, you can see that SDCERS' diversified portfolio has been beneficial and has had performance that has been more efficient than both of these other metrics. And that is accounting for the diversification you all have had in earning a higher level of return for a unit of risk taken relative to these two benchmarks. Is there anything you would add, Ashley, to that? Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, do you have a
You have a question?
Thanks, Cliff. Cliff and I have had some prior discussions about some of these aspects, so I just want to explain that I struggle with my role here when it comes into the investment area. I'm not on the investment committee, and I sit in on the investment committee meetings, and I'm really impressed by the amount of information that comes through, the deliberations. And so what I've concluded is that the most appropriate place for me to express my opinions is at this juncture where we're deciding where to put stuff, and to leave it mostly to the investment committee once we've determined that, how within those parameters to invest. So if I may express that, first of all, I wanted to thank Karina because she told me that she had managed to get the private equity investments from 15% to 10%. I think she said that yesterday.
Over a period of years.
Well, however long it took, thank you. But I don't think we should have anything to do with private equity. I think for two reasons. One of them is that I think it creates a number of societal ills like homelessness, poor quality of care in nursing homes, and so forth. But as fiduciaries, I suppose our job is to invest where we can get the best return. And I just don't see that we, over the long haul, are likely to get the best return there. So I think it's a bad place for us to be, period. I also think that the opacity of these investments, the inability for us to control how the money is used, and the real inability to truly determine over time until the contract is ended the value of them. I mean, we have no idea. It's sort of just fantastical conjuring while the contracts are out there. So I think we should not be there. Second thing is that I think part of what's proposed here contributes to more manager bloat, where we've got more and more people managing our money that are being paid for that. And I don't think there's evidence that we will get better returns as a result of that. There was a recent study that was profiled in the New York Times showing that over the last 100 years, a pure play in the S&P 500 would have returned over 10% a year. And we could invest in that for 3 basis points in an ETF. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's what we should be doing. I totally endorse the idea of very diverse investments. But I think there are more efficient ways for us to approach all this. So I've said my piece. I'll just vote no. But I wanted you to understand where I was coming from and why that was my thought, as opposed to just sticking up a no vote. Thank you.
No, and thank you, Chris. This is part of an ongoing dialogue, an open discussion, and we're glad to have the differing, diverse perspectives that the various committee members bring to the process. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Any last comments on this?
Well, I'm pleased with Aon's work on this project. I thought they put together a very organized deck, and the staff and consultant worked through many iterations. So I appreciate Aon's work on this particular study. Chris, we'll have to come back to you in regards to your concerns. Obviously, it's very time period dependent, and to be frank, the last 10 years or so, the diversification, it's been a little bit of a bear, particularly the last few years when equity markets have performed so well. But you do get these very quick and painful reminders when you have, for example, the Liberation Day sell-off and other periods where, you know, the rate of the decline on the equity markets is so swift and so fast that you then appreciate why you are diversified. So it's really to invest for the longer period of time and to smooth the ride. And for that reason, we invest in private equity, although as hopefully you can appreciate over the last couple of years, we've been working on setting risk parameters around those allocations. So we had kind of been go anywhere, do anything before. And now we're being more deliberate and explicit with that risk taking, or trying to think about it more holistically. There's also, as you mentioned, there's opacity here, and you don't know really until the end, but that's why it's so important to have appropriate resourcing on these investments, and why we just now contracted with a private markets consultant for these asset classes that, again, we had advisors before, but not the consultant coverage. So we feel like adding resources here, you know, an ounce of care is worth way more than a pound of cure. And we feel like that's not money wasted, and actually could represent long-term some fee savings to SDCERS as we invest more directly in these spaces. In regards to manager bloat, we do have a fair number of managers. There could be potential for streamlining. I do think each manager serves a specific purpose in the portfolio. No one is exactly duplicating what the other is doing. And I think we can maybe walk through the portfolio at a later time. Obviously, we're going to have our structure review in September to study exactly what each of these mandates and are accomplishing for the portfolio. Boy, I've said a lot. I'll stop there.
Thank you. We have the motion has been made already. Before we go to the vote, I would like to report that the item under discussion here was discussed, as was mentioned earlier, at great length, and I think with great care and thoughtfulness, and the vote was 5-0 to approve. And with that, we call for the vote now, please, Rosie.
Mr. Morris, thank you. And Mr. Chair, this motion was moved by Ms. Roberta Spoon, and with all votes in, this motion passes with 9 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you. The second action item is a one-year extension of Aon's, State Street's custody agreement. SDCERS has used State Street Bank and Trust as its custodian since 1998. Wow. The current contract with State Street was signed in 2018 and expires September 2025. Given that SDCERS is currently working with Callan Associates to conduct an RFP for custodial services, staff is requesting a one-year extension to the State Street contract to expire on September 30th, 2026. This will allow time for the full RFP and contracting process to be completed. State Street's fees will not increase for the one-year extension, and it was also mentioned that we also have an option to cancel this extension on 30 days written notice, giving us additional flexibility. This item was approved 5-0 by the Investment Committee. Are there any questions from the board on this item before we vote? Not seeing any. We have a motion. We call for the vote, please.
And Mr. Chair, this motion was moved by Mr. Kent Morris, and with all votes in, this motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. For information item, we have one of importance, which has to do with performance. The SDCERS total fund returned 0.5% net of fees for the first quarter of 2025, slightly outperforming the benchmark return of 0.3%. This brings the return of the total fund to 3.6% for the fiscal year to date, which is in line with our benchmark. For the quarter, strong outperformance in the global equity asset class contributed most significantly, although several asset classes outperformed their benchmarks. There is nothing to report out from this section of the 11 reports that are also part of the investment committee's work this meeting. That concludes my comments, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Cliff, for the committee report. We'll now move to section 10, question and comments. But before I ask for comments from the board members, I would like to provide a brief update on preparing for our CEO's retirement 3 years from now. And I know there's been some questions and comments, so I wanted to definitely address this issue. So although the CEO has been evaluating, monitoring, and developing staff since he joined the team over 7 years ago, now it's time for the board's ad hoc executive search committee to come into action with developing of various search and succession planning materials. And we expect the ad hoc committee, consisting of the following volunteer members: myself, Michelle, Lou, Louie, and Chris, will be meeting prior to our next board meeting. Do we have any questions or comments or educational session reports from the board members? Any comments? Greg?
Yes, thank you. To begin my comments, it is with great excitement that I announce the City Council will be considering at their next Tuesday, July 15th meeting, the reappointment of Lisa Marie and Michelle. We are just so excited about that. And we're just really fortunate to have Lisa Marie and Michelle continue their leadership with us. But conversely, it's with great disappointment that I announce the City Council has yet to fill our vacant position on the board. But we're working with the mayor's office and continuing to give them recommendations on candidates and let them know that we're in need. So we continue to work with them. If you know of anyone in our community that would like to be considered, please let me know.
I do have a friend who applied, and he said he hasn't heard anything back from the mayor's office. Should I nudge through you or straight to the mayor?
I would glad to provide some nudges.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And you're also welcome to nudge the mayor. That would be fun, too.
Will do.
That would be good. Conversely, is with great excitement that I announced the city paid their July 1st, 2025 actually determined contribution bill in full and on time. Whoa. And so I know we've been looking in the media about the city. Our community has so many needs, and it seems like we have less and less to meet those needs. But I'm really, really glad that all three of our plan sponsors, the city, the port, and the airport, made their full ADC contributions on time, and it's really a commitment by the plan sponsors that they're making good on their promise of the compensation packages that they've designed for their employees and funding the plan. So really, really excited about that. In closing, I would like to take a moment to recognize our benefits administration team. This is a surprise. I didn't talk to Sandra about this, but they had a great fiscal year. I was thinking about what's been happening in this past fiscal year. And we have really leaned heavily on the benefits administration team. And they have successfully worked through the city reopening their pension plans by completing phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 now 4. Now we expect the city will rehire former employees, and we may never be truly done with Prop B, but at least we've moved from project management to maintenance. Additionally, over the past year, the benefits administration team implemented 2 benefit tiers for the port to eliminate the 5-year waiting period to join the pension plan. And more recently, the benefits administration team successfully helped the airport implement their Social Security 218 agreement, which allowed a number of airport employees to opt in or opt out of Social Security, thus causing a ripple effect of recalculating pensionable earnings and employee contributions. Also helping the city transition to a new and improved retiree healthcare administrator. So This is in addition to all their regular work that they normally do. So please know that they did not do this alone. These types of projects takes from all areas, IT, legal, member services, internal audit. We all work together to get these projects done. But the heavy lifters always seem to include benefits administration. So thank you, Sandra, Monty, Chris, Christina, Paul, Krista, Fiona, Maria, Naili, and Rosa. You are my meeting heroes. Thank you. This concludes my comments.
Okay, are there any questions for Greg? Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll move to closed session.
Thank you.
Man, we're rocking here.
I know.
like an educational thing where there's a guide telling you about what you're looking at?
Let's start with Johnny.
Okay. Have all the staff returned that are going to return?
Yes.
Okay. So we have finished closed session and returned back to open session agenda items, starting with Section 12 closed session report. Johnny, do we have a closed session report?
Thank you. We went into closed session, but there's no action to report publicly.
Okay. All right, so I'd like to recognize SDCERS Human Resources Director Colin Brazil to present a salary survey information for the CEO and the Chief Internal Auditor.
Thank you. So in the audit committee meeting yesterday, we discussed the salary survey that I provided for them for the chief internal auditor, and they determined that she was appropriately compensated, so there were no changes and nothing to vote on at this time. And moving forward, every July I present you all with a similar salary table for the CEO for you to have to assist you in determining if any salary adjustments are necessary for him in September. So today there's no action with this information. If you all have any questions about this survey, I can answer them, but for now it's just for information for you to assist you with your decision-making process.
Okay, are there any questions for Colin? No, Greg?
I have one.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
I just wanted to recognize and thank the board that when I first came to SDCERS, I don't think we were competitive in the labor market. And over the past 7 years, the board has really been supportive of, not just in my position, but various positions throughout the organization of trying to come to the equal in the labor market. And I think we've seen that in the chief internal auditor and the CEO, and also to a large part, our chief investment officer, along with some other positions. So with that said, just speaking about the CEO's compensation, I think your CEO is very fairly compensated. The city of San Diego provided across the board cost of living raises as of July 1st, 5%. And that applied as SDCERS employees are technically city employees. That also applied to all of the SDCERS employees, represented and unclassified or non-represented. So.
Can we claw that back?
No.
Yes, you can. So there's no expectation on my part for my salary to be further supplemented or added, and I would actually prefer you don't do that in September. So just wanted to put that out on the record as you cogitate for our next meeting.
All right, thank you, Greg. Any other comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Paul.
Greg, are you seeing any feedback, blowback on your level of salary from the members of the city? I mean, you're, as I understand it, you're now the most expensive person we've got in the city.
Not since this publicly broadcast meeting, Paul, no.
Well, let's just keep it to a minimal.
Good thing that the audience is kind of limited for this,
Yep.
this meeting, so.
Not many people. Okay, well, if there's no other, are there any other closing comments by any of the board? All right, this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job, Lisa Marie. That was fast.
It did. I thought for sure we were going to hit noon, 12:30.
All right, cancel the pizza.
Impossible.